let's get straight into it with the World Series of Darts finals finished up last night when we're recording this. Gerwyn Price, the world number one, takes home the title in Amsterdam, beating the home favourite Dirk van Dijvenbode 11-10 in the final. And it is a ninth TV title for the Iceman, one away from double figures. And it got me thinking there's still a lot of years left for the top level for Gerwyn Price. But right now, where would you place him in the all-time top 10 and also the PDC all-time top 10?
Well, I limited it just to PDC top 10 because I thought that was the more interesting placing. I think he's just still outside the top 10 all time, but getting even closer as each day passes. I think he's probably 11th or 12th best all time right now, but I don't think he cracks the top 10 quite yet because of just how many great players there are, male and female, from the last 40 years. But what he's done in a very short time has already put him in that conversation. If you look at the other people on that list who everyone would agree on, it wasn't just a 5-6 year spurt that got them there. It was 10, 20, sometimes even 30 years at the top of the game that led to them being the all-time legends. And I think before he can stake a claim as top 10 all time, he needs to sustain this for a few more years. But what he's done in such a short amount of time to already be in that conversation is something that very few players have done. You know, if you look at players, at least other than at the start of the televised era when there was less of a history to look back on, but the more recent players who've cracked in, it is been because of a long CV. Really, Phil Taylor was probably the last player who broke into the top 10 all time quickly. Peter Wright, if he's there now, it's after 10 years at the top. But if you look in the history of the PDC, because the history of the PDC is shorter, and until the past couple of years, okay, the PDC has been open to anyone, but didn't have a separate women's competition where players could rack up titles and build a CV. It's been limited mostly to male players. So the list is shorter, and I think Gerwyn Price is higher up on that. I think whichever order you want to put it, Phil Taylor and Michael Van Gerwen are 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. I think James Wade is still third all time, even though he's not won a world championship. What he's done for 17 years now, year in, year out, being a top 10 player, if not better. Sometimes, there's years where he's the second best player in the world. And every time we think he's finished, he kicks it into gear again. I think he has to take third because of that longevity, ahead of double world champions Gary Anderson and Peter Wright, who I have fourth and fifth, and triple world champion John Part. But then at number 7 is where I think Gezi slots in right now. I think Gerwyn Price is the 7th best player in PDC history. As you said, he's one away from 10 televised titles in the PDC. Only Phil Taylor, Michael Van Gerwen, and James Wade have managed to win 10 major titles before. It seems only a matter of time before he'll join them. And by matter of time, I don't mean I mean a matter of very little time. He could do it in the World's Grand Prix in just a couple weeks. Putting him at 7, I put him ahead of Raymond van Barneveld. I have Barney at 8. Barney hit the ground running in the PDC, but the longevity at the top wasn't there. After those first few years, the titles really did dry up. He did get the odd title now and then. He won the Grand Slam in 2012. He won the Premier League a couple years later. And he kept making World Championship semifinals for a very long time. But the titles dried up, as did the other successes. And I think the longevity, his CV is very similar to Gezi's in the PDC in terms of success, especially when you factor in there were fewer events. But the longevity didn't match. And I think Gezi has already, by having 6 years at the top, surpassed him. So I put Gezi ahead of him. I'm already it's tough. I have 3 players, 9, 10, and 11, that I don't know the order for. I think Rob Cross, the longevity isn't there yet, but he's won 4 major titles. He's won a bunch of Pro Tour titles. And okay, he hasn't been as good as he was in his first season, but he still is a feisty competitor all the time. I think he's there in the top 11. I think Dennis Priestley, even though he only won the 1 major, he made so many finals, those 4 World Championship finals, all those World Match Play finals, and longevity, stick around as a contender, and even have a renaissance in the second half of the noughties, where he made some deep runs again. I think that puts him in the conversation. I think Rod Harrington has to be there as well, winning those pair of world match plays, making a world championship final, winning 3 Golden Harvest titles. You might not know what that event was, but that actually was an event that became a major a few years later for a few years, an event in Saskatchewan, Canada, and was one of the richest events on the PDC calendar in the early days. Rod Harrington won that 3 years in a row, beating Alan Warner Little, Dennis Priestley, and Phil Taylor in those 3 finals. Okay, those weren't majors at the time, but just to win that event 3 years in a row shows how good of a player he was and might otherwise be forgotten as a top 10 in PDC history. So I'm going with the top 11. The top 8 I've put in order, and I just can't separate Cross, Priestley, and Harrington right now.
We're now on to 267 episodes, but I think that's the first time we've had a mention for the Golden Harvest Cup. So we're still bringing new content to you guys. But I think all-time top 10, that is a difficult one to judge, as you said, because, we are looking back at a longer period of time. The pool of players, the general standard in the game, it has risen over the years. And I think the last time we had a question like this was when Peter Wright won, I think it was the World Match Play last year. And we said, is he now in the top 10? And I said he wasn't far away. A second world title would probably just put him in my list. And of course, he went on to win that second world title at the start of this year. So for me, Peter Wright is in my top 10 of all time. Gerwyn Price, I don't have in my top 10 at the moment, but you have to say with each year that passes, as his haul of titles continues to grow, he is climbing up everyone's list. And I think if you were to ask our listeners, most of them, I would guess, would have Price maybe in their top 20 of all time. I think that's fair for the moment. And once his career's over the way he's going, you would back him to break into most people's top 10. And I think the PDC top 10, that is an easier discussion to have. And I'd have him in mine already. I think the top 5 you gave yours, we're pretty similar, aren't we? You're looking at Phil Taylor, Michael Van Gerwen, Gary Anderson, Peter Wright, James Wade in no particular order for that top 5. And after that, the likes of Gerwyn Price, Raymond van Barneveld, Adrian Lewis, John Park with his 2 world titles in the PDC, Rob Cross, Rod Harrington, Colin Lloyd in there as well, I'll throw in as well. But I think Gerwyn Price, he is comfortably in that top 10 of the PDC all time. And this is someone that's now won a TV title in 5 consecutive years since that first major breakthrough at the Grand Slam 2018. He's continued to progress, won the World Championship last year, got to world number 1 and lost that world number 1 spot earlier this year, but he's now got a second spell as world number 1. He looks to have got that hunger back for the game after what was a stop-start iffy first half of the year with the injury that he had. And he said himself in the interview afterwards on stage after the final on Sunday that he was rubbish for 3 or 4 months, and now he feels like he's coming back and he's getting back towards his best. And you look at how he played at the weekend as well. 4 close games he had there. Matt Campbell went to a last leg decider. Joe Cullen beat him 10-8, James Wade 11-9, and then the decider with Dirk 11-10, and Dirk threw everything at him, and he had the crowd against him in that game as well, but showed his class, showed his experience at the end. And yeah, top 10, I think PDC, that's nailed on. But as far as top 10 of all time, I don't think he's there yet, but the way he's going, I think he's heading that way.